Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Raymore City Council work session for Monday, March the 18th, 2024. By the way, tomorrow's Vicky's birthday. If you get a chance, wish her happy birthday. First item is the 2024 Citizen Survey. I'll turn it over to Mr. Fearborn.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to immediately turn it over to Mr. Murdoch to make this presentation to you all tonight.
Thank you, sir. So in front of you, you have two large packets. Okay, the larger of the two packets is the full results of this past year's citizen survey. So it'll give you every question that was asked. It'll give you all of the responses that were given throughout from all of our residents, and we'll go through a little bit about some of the details of the survey here in just a second. Also within the larger packet, I do want to make sure that you know there are some open-ended responses towards the back end. And so when we get a little bit closer towards the end of this presentation, we'll highlight a few of those things in relation to the open-ended responses that some of our residents did give. As you probably know, typically people who are willing to give an open-ended response are less positive than those who aren't. And that is common among almost any survey. So it's about a 5-to-1 ratio, which by the way is almost exactly the same in terms of the last surveys that we have done as well, in terms of what we get in terms of open-ended comments. But I do want to highlight a couple of the things in the open-ended comments when we get there. The second packet that you have, the smaller of the two packets, is a mapping of all of the answers. It is a very good way to see what our city or our residents think about a question, but just in a nice and easy way to say, we agree, we don't agree. It's color-coded by your ward, and so it's a little bit easier to understand where some of the residents' responses are coming from in each one of the questions, and whether or not they are in strong agreement or satisfied, end up being neutral, that kind of thing in terms of some of the questions. And so all of those essentially are heat mapped here for you as well within the GIS packet. So that's the smaller packet that you have. Because you're getting this tonight, and this survey is already online, so it's at raymore.com under and with the other surveys from previous years, but I know that there's a lot to look through. So even after tonight, if you have questions about any of the specific answers that were given, or you have any clarifications that you need, don't hesitate to reach out, and we'd be happy to provide those answers for you in relation to some of the different questions and why some of the results are the way they are. For tonight, we are going to try to give you, or the goal will be to do a quick overview and highlight some of the big areas here. Essentially, satisfaction with major services within the city, image of Raymore, that kind of thing. That's what we're going to highlight in the work session part here. And then we will talk, like I said, just a little bit about the open-ended responses. For your reference, we ended up with, or the goal was to get 400 responses for the survey. And so over the course of a couple of months, the ETC Institute was able to accomplish that task. And we ended up with 435 responses to this particular survey, which gives it a high degree of confidence in terms of what the results are that we are getting. We did get questions, just to note, at the very beginning when we started the survey window, people were wondering, can I just go online and fill it out? No, you could not. We did randomly select and send mailers to the people. If you got something in the mail asking you to participate in the survey, then you could go online, use the code, fill in the survey, and then they cross-checked the address. That's how we made sure that it was Raymore residents that were the ones filling out the survey. So we did get some of those questions, so just to kind of address that, that's how that ended up working. So we had about 435 people who participated in the survey, and you'll see with some of the responses that it wasn't necessarily true that everybody answered every question. That's pretty typical as well. Most of the people fill out the majority of the survey, or sometimes when they don't know an answer to a question or don't have information about it, instead of putting neutral or something like that, they just don't answer it at all. And so we do have sometimes, especially if you dig into the bigger packet, you will see numbers that will vary from question to question in terms of the totals that people answered. That's why that is. So we're going to start with the overall satisfaction here with major city services. It's one that we can compare from year to year and from survey to survey. You don't necessarily need to try to find it in your packet. If you want to, that's fine, but I'm just going to operate off of the screen because we're just doing a high-level look at each one of these things here. Ultimately, what we want to hopefully get out of this, or what staff certainly took from this, is the people of Raymore are either satisfied or very satisfied with the vast majority of services that we provide. That's the overarching takeaway from the survey. That is not going to mean that in some categories we did not drop a few points, maybe from 80 to 78% or something like that. And you'll see that here in just a little bit. We're not going to, we do want to make sure that we address some of those areas. But with our city services, our public safety still ranks incredibly high. That has been true ever since the survey started here in Raymore. That's true again as we're sitting almost at 90%, 88% that are either satisfied or very satisfied with our public safety services. One of the best parts of that particular question is the very few people who even rate themselves as neutral, which means most people are up to date. They know what's going on in the city. That's a good thing. So we get a high level of response and we get a high level of satisfied and very satisfied responses. So that's really good for public safety. The maintenance of city buildings and facilities was over 80%. That would have been true from the last survey as well. And then as we start to work down the list, this is where our increased answers in terms of being neutral or in some cases dissatisfied with some of the services here in the city kind of start to take over. So quality of parks and recreation still very high, up to 80%. That number's up actually from the last survey. So kudos to Parks and Recreation in that regard. Our quality of customer service is sitting at nearly 80%, 78%. And then our city communication with the public is sitting in the high 60s. That's the one, or in some of these here, especially if you're looking up at the screen, I suppose, as well. The four after that are where we start to have these high percentages of neutral responses. So quality of city stormwater and runoff management system. That's a great example of a question that many people just don't know the answer to, one way or the other. Those who've had experiences with it are primarily satisfied, but then keep in mind we have had some issues with stormwater and runoff, which certainly impacted some of the results of some of the people who would have said that they were dissatisfied, but that was still a very low percent. The city code and ordinances and the enforcement of those codes and ordinances is sitting all the way at about 53%. Again, 31% noted that they were just neutral on it. In some of the open-ended responses, you would also see a reason for some of the neutral responses on that question is they've never had any interaction with it, right? They've never had to report a code violation, or they've never had a code violation reported about their property or anything like that, so they just haven't had any interaction, which is why that neutral percentage ends up staying really, really high. One that should not come as a shock to you are the last two, which are going to be our traffic congestion and street maintenance. Those are ranking the lowest in terms of our major city services. I think it is important and incumbent upon us as staff to make sure that we recognize that's not an indictment on our public works staff and the work that they are trying to do. It's more speaking to the fact of the limited personnel that they have to do the work that needs to get done in a city that has grown exponentially over the last 20 years. If you followed our social media as we have kind of started some of the information related to the use tax, you'll know that we have started to put some numbers together from 20 years ago versus today in terms of staffing, lane miles, all that kind of stuff. And Mr. Fearborn's going to highlight some of that here if he wants to right now, or do you want to wait till the next?
I was just going to jump in.
Yeah, go ahead. Go for it.
Nope, go ahead.
Okay. And so he'll be highlighting some of that as we talk about the use tax after the citizen survey. But it's a great show of where we have come in 20 years. So the satisfaction takeaways that we would say from staff, our residents are pleased. There's no doubt about that. And that would be showcased even as you drill down into the individual questions as well, that the vast majority of our residents are either satisfied or very satisfied with the services that the city is providing. What we do want to call the council's attention to here is that those demand for services and amenities continues to increase. And ever since essentially coming out of the pandemic, as work and life balances have shifted across the entire country, by the way, it's not just Raymore, the demand for those services increases, but unfortunately, the demand to pay less for those services has also increased. And so you have competing factors right there as we try to navigate a growing city with essentially a political climate, I would argue, at this particular point, a political climate that is less on board with having to pay for some of those amenities and services. And we just got to continue to navigate that, and we will as a city. Finally, it's going to be, and you'll see this if you really get into a lot of the specific questions, one of the things that residents showed the most interest in is wanting to see long-range planning for the city, wanting to see where do we hope to go in 5, in 10 years and on out. Where is that development going to be? What are the businesses we're hoping to attract? All of those kinds of things are things the residents would love to see when we got into some of those responses. And so it'll be incumbent upon staff and then council to make sure that we are able to articulate that vision as decisions are made, to look forward and say, hey, in 5 years, this is where we hope to be. Whether it be with reimagining the 58 corridor or the curve, right? It doesn't matter. We just need to make sure, and the residents have told us this now through these surveys, that they want to at least be informed, right? Let us know, where are you going with some of these things? So that'll be something we need to do. Any questions so far on that one? This is where residents want our emphasis to be here over the next few years, and this again should not come as a very big surprise to any of us. They want maintenance of their streets. That's the number one thing that they would like, is traffic and streets, traffic and streets, traffic and streets. I mean, it is hitting us in the head over and over and over again throughout this survey. And the specific questions even, you'll find, go from commercial streets all the way down into your neighborhood streets, cul-de-sacs, all that kind of stuff in terms of what the survey was asking about, and the same answer continues to happen, right? We want maintenance of the streets, we want our sidewalks repaired, we want curbs, we want all that. That's going to be showcased in almost every individual question within this particular survey. Residents would like us to continue to focus on public safety. You will see here in just a little bit that there was a slight dip in the public's perception of the visibility even of our public safety and police, especially within neighborhoods and retail areas, and wanting to hopefully see an increase in visibility within those areas. As if we were to have Chief here tonight, he would probably tell you the same thing, which is they only have so many people that they can get out to so many areas all at once. And so that's something else that we will continue to look at and try to get them out into neighborhoods. The final things here, starting with the overall quality of our city parks and recreation, so 29% and lower, those are all actually things that are going relatively well. And so like I told you, even with the first slide, the Parks and Recreation has seen an increase in their ratings from the public here over the last couple of years. And then we'll continue to look, or the emphasis, I guess, on communicating with the public, looking at our codes and ordinances and all that kind of stuff. So the maintenance of buildings and facilities is all the way down at 3%. It's just not something that our public really worries very much about here for us over the next couple of years. So let's talk about the overall satisfaction and a historical trend. And I apologize for this one if with the numbers. Here's the overarching takeaway. Nearly every number is down. That's the reality of it. And we just have to hit that head on. Nearly every single category is down a little bit. And it doesn't mean that it's gone down by much, right? In a lot of cases, especially one of the ways to look at it would probably be pre-pandemic to post-pandemic in terms of the way that the survey is done. So if you started just with the yellow bars and then worked to the blue, you'll see that there's just a few percentage points in most categories, but there's also some significant drops that we're going to need to be able to address. And again, if you go all the way down to the bottom, one of the lowest drops is traffic congestion, street maintenance. And so we're going to have to continue to address those kinds of numbers over the course of these next couple of years. So that just gives you the historical perspective there on the bar graph of kind of where we were at over the last 3 surveys here. And like I said, nearly every category has seen just a small drop with the exception, I believe, of Parks and Rec, which is up in terms of the pre-pandemic to post-pandemic. It's down from 2 years ago, but it is interesting, and it probably should be noted as well, that the survey that we gave the last time was right in the heart of the pandemic. It was at the end of 2021, and I do think that while we don't want to blame the pandemic, and that's not what we would say as a staff, we did not have the level of interaction in the community of people out and about that we do now. And so we do have to keep that in mind. Even when you think about street maintenance and roads, just people weren't out. People were staying home significantly more than they do now, which also will have impacted how some of these answers were given in this particular survey. Okay, so residents' perception of Raymore. That's where we're at here, and this will be the other kind of big rock for tonight in terms of what we would like to talk about. And it's going to be the perception of the city of Raymore. And again, kind of corresponding with the police department and public safety, the overall feeling of safety in the city is incredibly high. And well over 80% of the people would say that they are, that they feel very, very safe, either excellent or good feeling of safety within the city. That's really, really good. And in the actual survey, it even goes so far as to say, do you feel safe during the day? Do you feel safe at night? Do you feel safe when you're in retail areas? All of those kinds of things are all asked within the survey, so you can drill down into those questions if you would like. One of the things that is interesting to me within the survey is this second one. And the reason that I think that it's interesting is the quality of services provided by the city is rated incredibly high. But that number doesn't necessarily jive with the major services thing from before, right? So when you have people that are being asked to reflect on the services and how it makes them feel within the city of Raymore, the number is higher than when they get to have a specific answer of saying, what service is not going well, essentially, so streets or whatever. And so I do think that that's interesting that those numbers don't necessarily go hand in hand. Quality of life in the city, over 3/4 of our residents say that it's excellent or good in terms of the quality of life within Raymore. Image of the city, again, almost 3/4 of our residents, about 70%, would tell you that the overall image of the city is good or excellent. Those are all excellent numbers to obviously be having here. Appearance of the city is where we start to get into the 60% mark, and then as we start to go into a place to retire, taxes, the tax one is 54%. Sorry, I kind of lost my place there. 54% of the residents think they're getting what they should for their tax. We've talked about that one, by the way, as a staff, of needing to do a good job of educating people on the amount of tax dollars that we get on their overall tax bill, so that they understand that a large portion of their taxes are going to the school district, and then a significantly smaller portion is actually coming to the city, and hopefully trying to help the public understand the limited resources of their taxes that are coming to us and what we're able to do with those dollars. That's a harder conversation because it takes longer to get those explanations in, but we'll keep at that one to make sure that our residents know that we're doing the best we can, or we're doing a good job with
What's
that.
interesting, though, is that 29% were neutral on that. And, so what does that speak to? Does that speak to their inability to know how much is being spent on city services and how much of their tax dollars are going toward good causes, or why the almost 30%?
One of the things that we note, and you've seen it on the others, and Mr. Murdoch has brought it up, but you see it significantly in here as we go down from overall value. There is, compared to other years, there's not a black and white with this.
Right.
There is a significant portion of the population that took the time to fill this out, but clearly did not know the answers to these questions and didn't feel qualified for that. So you're seeing a significant increase in the number of neutral responses on these, which is probably to this particular year, maybe a lot of new residents got it who haven't had the chance to experience things with the codes violations. Several of these, you're looking at a third of our population responding saying, I just don't know.
Yeah, Sonia?
Is it I don't know, or is it, the classic, it's fine, it's fine? it's fine.
It's
you know?
both. It's
Combination of
both.
I think it's more it's
Exactly.
fine than I don't know, but probably some of both.
I'm filling this out, but I've only lived here for 2 weeks, and/or I just, whatever. I'm turning my water spigot, and it's going.
It's also based on, if you think about, we have the majority of people don't have interaction necessarily with City Hall. So keep that in mind, right? I mean, we'll have people who call us for something, but people who actually come into the building and have an interaction with us, while we enjoy that, that's not going to be the majority of our residents. To your point of, it's going great. I don't have anything to come up and tell you about, right? So then the low percentage numbers that we have, but also to Mr. Fearborn's point, anytime we see 30% or more in that neutral area, it's probably a question that we would want to continue to ask, right? So as we get into how well is the city planning for growth, job availability, and then managing growth, all of those things are going to be ones that we're going to want to work on. There's no doubt about that because of the low satisfaction numbers. But the flip side of that is also true in terms of moving the needle of those neutrals, right? Making sure that they know what is actually going on in the city. Yes, sir.
Question for you about the general data. Is there any information on what percentage of people didn't want to fill it out?
In terms of how many did
They
we actually
didn't-
mail?
didn't respond.
So the mailing ended up going, I do have those statistics, and so I don't want to be
Yeah.
too casual with those numbers. It took a little more than double getting it out to people to actually get them to send it back. That's essentially where we're at, yeah. But I do have the specific on that. So we do have some low numbers there at the very bottom there in terms of growth. And this, by the way, continues to speak to the previous one of a lot of our residents want to know where are we going here in the next few years. And I think that would help those numbers immensely in terms of managing the growth, planning for growth, those kinds of things. So the takeaways from this particular one, and then we'll do the same thing here in just a second where you'll see the graph as well in terms of the cities. So we do have the vast majority of people, like we said, 3/4 of our residents believe that the quality of life here in Raymore is very, very high. Public safety image continues to be very, very high. And then we did add the areas of focus that we need, okay? Long-range planning, maintenance of our streets, and job creation. Now, some of that, by the way, even to some of the open-ended responses people did, there were a couple of open-ended responses even towards opening of all of the warehouses down south as a positive. So that's good. People are recognizing that is spurring job growth within the city, so that's also good. Yes, sir.
That was the question I was going to ask. I'm sure these questions didn't highlight types of jobs they're looking for. So that's the part of the study that you do.
Yeah, that's true. It will not differentiate the kind of jobs that people would actually like to see within the city. That's something that we would have to drill down as a staff. So essentially the last slide here as a part of this is going to be, again, doing a 3-survey comparison. And just like with the other ones, nearly all of these numbers are down in just a little bit. Some of them are almost identical, but some of them are also down. I do think also, in terms of looking at other cities around us, I do want to highlight that some of the questions that we ask are similar to what other cities would be asking too. And one of the ones on our survey here that you see a really large drop in is the availability of affordable housing. Our number, and this is not necessarily a great thing, but let's just call it what it is, our number's higher than a lot of cities even right now in terms of the amount of affordable housing or the quality of affordable housing that we have. There are other communities who are below 25% in satisfaction with the availability, and that's due to housing prices continue to skyrocket, especially single-family residential homes. And then as apartments or multifamily housing comes in, sometimes those rents are still out of the price range of people who would want to move into some of those things. So we'll have to continue to work on all of these things, but I do think that those top lines still are the ones that we can take great pride in, the feeling of safety, the feeling of the quality of the services that we are providing to our residents. those are always going to be essentially some benchmarks that we want to be able to hit. Is our city safe? Are we providing good services for our residents? I mean, those are two huge things that'll continue to drive growth within the city, and that's a good thing. The other part here, and I mentioned it at the beginning of this presentation, and for us as a staff, we'll need to continue to communicate with the public. We'll want to make sure that they understand some of the budget constraints around some of the services we're providing. A great example of that is street preservation. As you all know, costs have gone through the roof to do X number of feet or miles of street and or curb. And so to educate and help our residents understand that we understand that your curb may be one that you'd love to see done, or you'd like to see your street with a mill and overlay. We get that. But there's only X number of miles that we can do with the budget that we have. And continuing to make sure that people understand what those distances even are that we can provide, and point them to the long-range map of the streets that have been identified for this year. We've gotten those questions even this year, and we've been able to point to, or let me rephrase, Ms. Harmer has been able to immediately respond to them and say, actually, your street is on for this year. You're going to see it repaired this year, or your street is actually on for next year in terms of the long-range plan, and so that's a good thing. I guess I will finish with this, because then if you have any questions, we'd be happy to talk about this or answer any of them. The open-ended responses that you'll find in the back of the packet, I'd encourage you to read through them, but I would also encourage this. Many of the open-ended responses are going to identify things that we have absolutely nothing to do with, and we can't have anything to do with. For example, we're not going to increase the number of classrooms in the Ray-Pec School District. Right? That's one of the comments. And I get where they're coming from, right? As the city grows, they're concerned about school population. Totally understandable, but it's a part of, as they give responses within this survey, that makes it a little bit more difficult for us to decipher where to go when you see some of those particular responses. I was telling Councilmember Townsend even before the meeting, on these heat maps, or the maps that you have from the GIS, this is a great snapshot if anybody were to ask you as well. You know, so you literally can just take any of the questions and just say, how safe do people feel in the commercial and retail areas of the city? Everything is blue. We either want it blue or we want it dark blue. So if any of these that are primarily blue or dark blue, that means our residents feel really, really good about it. And nearly everything within that packet is going to fall into that category. And that's a good thing too. Doesn't mean that there's not things that we need to work on as a city, and we will. But I think overall these results actually are encouraging. Even though we saw a little bit of a drop in some numbers, I think the results overall are encouraging for the amount of growth that we have going in Raymore. And sir, I'm happy to answer any questions about it.
Thanks, Ryan. Yeah, Sonia?
Just a couple of comments. Having looked at these for a few years, one of the things that they said in one of our sessions talking actually with the company about this, looking at the written comments at the end, is just keep in mind that that's one person's opinion. Like, nothing to jump on any of those pages unless we see that comment repeated over and over and over, but that's one person's opinion. You know, I think that's something that's always important to keep in mind. I also noticed when I was just flipping through, one of the other places that were consistently higher, this Arts Commission page, every one of the arts questions was higher this year than before. So that kudos to the Arts Commission and those of us who've been here that have supported that for so many years. And then I always like to look at, like Ryan mentioned, where we fall compared to other cities. So look at our percentages and then look at the percentages for other cities in our region or in the country, and that always is interesting to see that generally we fall way above where other cities do. So thanks for the report.
points.
Absolutely.
Anyone else? Yeah, Tabitha?
I was curious, I know you said a lot with the maintaining the roads and the traffic, or I was more concerned almost about the traffic. Like, that's the most complaints I get about what are we doing for, do you feel like that was also part of what they were trying to direct, not just the maintenance, but also what's our game plan for communicating better to what our plan is for the traffic?
I think it's both a communication issue and an education issue for folks. Consistently, we continue to see, when you drill down into that, people who are confused about the interchange. And we are trying to take the lead on making sure that the interchange causes backups all the way back here. I mean, it impacts Operation Greenlight all the way back on 58. All things kind of lead to 58, use tax presentation to follow. We need to educate them better, and we do need to take the lead on getting that interchange fixed. Kind of discussed a little bit of that with the council in executive session last week. So,
I think another comment too, because I saw in there, just glancing through several individual comments about multifamily housing, and one of the things that I think people, when they see that kind of development going on, really don't understand is that the city has not gone out and sought them. They have sought us out and have asked for information, providing what availability of lands and owners are out there that we can contact. And if they come to us with a cogent plan that falls within the parameters of state statute as well as city ordinance, it's difficult for us to say no when they've put everything together appropriately and legally. And so those areas that are developed in that way, if you look up and down the highway, you'll see in other communities the same type of progress occurring in similar situations. And that's just how residential growth and population growth occurs within a major metropolitan area. So, I get upset when people say that we brought them here. No, they brought themselves. We told them what we had available. They're the ones that put the money out for it. If they were really great developments, we may have offered some incentivizations, but nothing that we weren't going to get back very quickly, in sometimes tenfold. So we're always looking out for the community, and so I hope those folks understand that we don't make those extremely important decisions willy-nilly just because we're wanting more people in the community to pay taxes. That's not the case. It is quality developers seeking us for their development. Anyway. Next.
if I could just add one more thing
Sure.
to that. Related but unrelated, I found the number relative to affordable housing to be interesting because it somewhat contradicts those same one-off complaints. So much so that the developers now, they have not gone to affordable housing because affordable housing gets confused a little bit with LIHTC housing. Developers, when you're talking to them now, and you may hear this narrative in front of you coming up in the future as we continue to develop, they talk about attainable housing. And so they're trying to build homes that will meet the needs of first-time home buyers now, with still wanting single-family homes. So something that staff is certainly cognizant of with that terminology now, when they're coming in and they're saying, we need smaller lot homes and we need Clover and Hive style buildings so that it is attainable for those first and second time home buyers in the market. So kind of a mashup there of affordable versus attainable versus luxury homes versus, we want them all. We want the diversity of housing in Raymore, and to that end, when those developers come to us with a quality development, and we turn a whole lot of them away before the council even sees it, the ones the council sees have been vetted very, very carefully. So thank you for making the point, sir.
All right, so our next item is unless somebody has anything else, next item is the use tax. Jim's going to talk to us tonight about informational issues as we have an ongoing discussion about the education of the community about the use tax, and there's another segment aspect to it that he's going to discuss this evening. So Jim?
Thank you, sir. Yes, we always want to keep items in front of the public and in front of the council relative to the upcoming use tax issue. I did send a text message to our general counsel today. This is just information for the council. Use tax question. This is from me to general counsel. Can I publicly say, like in a meeting, I certainly hope people will support this issue? Response from general counsel: as long as no one raises a stink, you can say just about anything. That was his cavalier answer. Here's what I'm actually supposed to say, instead of I hope people will support this issue. Informational only. Technically speaking, it would be better to say, I certainly hope people will educate themselves on the issue, including the significant impacts to financial stability to the city in providing essential services to the residents. Something we've just now heard about here, going to dovetail into our use tax presentation. So there's been a lot of discussion. There have been a lot of people with good background in economics, degrees in economics, who have made comment relative to the use tax. I have a couple of degrees in economics myself, so just wanted to, as the start of this particular presentation, talk about a law within economics that's discussed. There are three types of scarcity, and you've heard me use that word a lot during budget presentations. Scarce resources, unlimited wants. One of those scarcity, one of those three, is demand-induced scarcity. And that's what we are suffering from right now. Demand-induced scarcity is the demand for a resource increases while the supply remains the same. We have a number of resource demands, filling potholes, being visible in the community from a public safety standpoint, maintaining our parks to a level that is the expectation of a growing community. How are we going to meet that demand? We need to meet the demand by providing services. We are at a stretched limit on being able to provide the services that we need. Why are we there? Some statistics. 2004 to 2024. These are hard statistics. Population in 2004 was 14,425. Population in 2024, 25,367. That is a 75.85% increase. That's huge. Lane miles of road in 2004, 95. Lane miles of road in 2024, 304. That doesn't include curbs. Double it. That is a 220% increase. PD calls for service. 2004, 8,674 calls for service. 2024, 27,950 calls for service. Does not include the fire department. That's PD only. So nothing stretched. I mean, you can imagine what is stretched down in dispatch. But what I want to be giving you all is, we have promised 3 areas relative to personnel. And this is boots on the ground stuff that we're having to do with personnel. So that call for service increase, 222% in 20 years. PD 911 calls, 7,942 in 2004. 10,146 in 2024. These are intense calls for our boots on the ground people. That's a 27.75% increase. Parkland. In 2004, we had 137.5 acres. In 2024, we have 279.16 acres, a 103% increase. That does not include what in the next couple of years, we're going to get down off of 195th Street, which is going to be another 150 acres. Does not include the 12 acres coming on next year for the dog park. Park Trails, 2004, 1.37 miles of park trails. 2024, 8.86 miles of park trails, 546% increase. That's hard paved trails that have to be maintained. 2004, parks workers to work on those acreages and miles of trails. We had 6. 2024, we have 6. Public works workers, 2004, we had 12. 2024, we have 16, a 33% increase. A little behind the increases associated with what they're working on. Police officers and sergeants, boots on the ground, 20 in 2004, 27 in 2024, a 35% increase. A little bit behind the 222% increase in calls for service for those people. We're behind. We have to meet the demand for resources. The supply has been stagnant. Revenue sources that have been reduced. This isn't, remember, one of the arguments we're very careful not to make. Sure, revenue is increasing. In most, when you look at generalized categories, our revenues are increasing. Our revenues are not increasing to meet these kind of demands because they're not increasing. We're taking care of the people we have as best we can, but we need more people because we're a service organization, as is obvious from this. These revenues, however, have actually decreased. It's not a decrease in the growth, they've actually decreased. Wireless service. In the last 10 years, we have seen a reduction from 2013 to 2023 actually realized, so we go back to 2023. Wireless franchise, 74% reduction in the revenue we're receiving there. The cumulative effect over those 10 years has totaled $2,053,000 lost, reduced. Landline revenue, 61% reduction from 2013 to 2023. Cumulative effect, $517,000. Cable. We're in a period right now, you all know, where cable is being, the percentage we are allowed to collect is being reduced by state statute from 5% down to 2.5%. It'll be at 2.5% in 2029. And it will remain there forever. That, and Google, as a part of that, is no longer cable. So they have reached an agreement with the council that we will only get, instead of 5% of their sales, we'll only get 1%. And they didn't have to give us the 1%. That was kind of a public relations deal. The emergency management grant is, I predict, will be an unfunded mandate to have an emergency management department. We're still gonna have it, but right now they have reduced from the formula where operating costs were reimbursed at a percentage to the only thing we can get reimbursed a percentage for is actual salary of our emergency management director. So again, a reduction in revenue, not a decrease in the amount we could have collected. Real estate tax credit for seniors, we've discussed with you all. That will be a reduction in revenue, not a decrease in what could have been collected. Could be as high, as we reported to the council, as 110, probably will go into effect in 2025. could be as high as $110,070, rising up in 5 years by 2029 to $761,995 and growing from there. This year, we'll probably pass a firearms and ammunition exempt from sales taxes. There are 4 bills, probably won't pass, but it's the 3rd or 4th year in a row that it's been on, and it will probably be considered in some form next year again, exemption from sales taxes entirely on food purchases. There are several bills running through with different formulas associated with them, reducing the personal property tax over between now and 2073, and all of them call for it to be reduced each year down to 0 and then never collected again on the personal property tax, which would mean millions for the city. All informational data, sir. Just wanted to get that out there. We'll be including these in a whole bunch of our information moving forward. You'll see it on the website after tonight, but I did want to present it to the council, and I probably should have told you ahead of time. I wasn't paying attention to everyone writing. I have sheets for you. I feel awful.
Just hold on to them now.
That's right.
You're all right.
Yeah, Jay?
Very good and very informative presentation. I was wondering if you might consider adding one additional statistic to that. Chris will remember this from his days as a chief in particular. I haven't seen it for a while, but it was a measure of level of services available from the police. You gave some pretty good numbers, but take those boots on the ground and give us ratio of police officer, working boot, to number of people in each of those years, number of citizens. So in other words, one police officer for 300 people within the city. That we know that number is going to be, they're going to be responsible for a much wider group of people for security and safety. I think it's a nice piece to add to that.
We will, sir. Actually, I've asked Development Services for that number, yeah, because they've increased dramatically. And that's a different type of call for service, and we have to be visible to this. It was both commercial areas and residential streets.
Were you going to add something, Ryan?
No,
Oh, okay. All right. All right. Okay, like Jay said, great information. Thank you for providing that this evening.
Thank you, sir.
Just another leg in the education process. Are there things coming in the future that we need to discuss with regard to a use tax purposes?
Well, it's 2 weeks from tomorrow, sir.
Okay.
If anybody has any questions on the processes, we do have Ms. Harmer here tonight. If you can give her a call, she can let you know the meeting she's been at, what's going to be coming up. There's going to be a couple of items coming out. Thank you for being here tonight, Mr. Wilson. There's going to be a couple of things coming out from the Vote Yes Committee. They've been very active. But I will be giving a wrap-up staff report during next week's meeting.
Okay.
And then the following one will be the work session the night before the election, sir.
Okay. All right. Excellent.
Yeah, that's what I was just talking to Melissa about. We do have the open houses that people can continue to share. It's on our website in terms of the use tax, so we're trying to hit it during the day and evenings. So we have one tomorrow, right?
No, Wednesday.
I mean, Wednesday and Wednesday and Thursday. So there
I
we
can
go.
give the times.
Yeah, there you go.
Hopefully everybody got the postcard at their house this weekend. Wednesday, we'll have an open house here at City Hall Council Chambers from noon to 3 p.m. and then 5 to 7:30 p.m. And on Thursday, this Thursday, the 21st, from 9 a.m. to noon and 5 to 7:30 p.m. again. So hopefully we hit all the open times for anybody to come and ask staff questions.
Yeah, those are all Q&A type
Right.
open houses, okay.
We've kind of designed them like the one that we had last year, but 4 of them for people's availability. There'll be a bunch of us there if people want to sit down with us one-on-one. I think the one-on-one goes a little bit better because people get, I think, concerned about asking a question publicly that they may not know the answer to, and because we're doing it in an open house format, there'll be enough of us there that we can address questions
Okay.
one-on-one.
Excellent. Sonia?
Quick question, maybe Melissa, have we made these events on Facebook? I know with our foundation events, okay. It's helpful for people.
It is. All right. If there's nothing else, I think we do have a reason to go into executive session. Litigation and personnel, okay.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we move into executive session to discuss litigation and personnel.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there a second?
Yes, sir, I'll second.
Thank you. Motion's been made and seconded to move into executive session. Could I have the roll call, please?
Councilmember Townsend.
Yes.
Councilmember Baker.
Yes.
Councilmember Forster.
Yes.
Councilmember Abdulgawad.
Yes.
Councilmember Burke.
Yes.
Councilmember Engert.
Yes.
Councilmember Barber. Yes. Councilmember Holman.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, we'll now move into executive session, and once we adjourn from that, we'll be adjourned.
Okay, I couldn't quite, I can tell our committee about the handout you gave me.
Absolutely, you may. I will not be there, but you should have a revised version of the letter